Hey guys, how are you? It's Thursday and I've got a really busy day at work, so I figured I'd take you with me because we have a lot going on before the evening even starts. So we're starting off today by doing a little whiskey tasting with Dalmore today. The rep is going to taste the whole staff, do a little spiel, so you guys are going to learn how to taste whiskey. You're going to learn all about the Dalmore brand, and then I've got a couple tastings with some wine reps because that's what we do. We taste wine to see if it's good enough for our clients and our guests to enjoy at the restaurant. So come on, we're gonna do a little BTS of press.
Record-breaking prices at auction, sought after by collectors around the world, seen at the finest bars and restaurants.
Do you like whiskey? Red. Get the 62 Dalmore. Honestly, this whiskey, it's amazing. You will shit.
It's a distillery that's been running spirits since 1839. We're in the northern highlands of Scotland, about 20 miles out of Inverness, and it was established first on an operating farm, which is probably why the name Dalmore was applied to it, which means big field, big meadowland in Scotch Gaelic, and that is what the landscape looks like there. You'll also find that we feed right down into the banks of the Cromarty Firth, which is a big deep sea channel that feeds out to the North Sea. In some of our older whiskeys, you will get a little bit of a maritime influence, a little bit of salinity and sea salt as the casks breathe that subtly briny sea air. But it takes a while. So in the whiskeys we're tasting today, we won't really find it, maybe a ghost of it on the 18th. What we're most known for in the modern era, and what I would argue that we're best in class at, is finishing, nuancing, bringing extra complexity to the whiskeys by finishing them in different types of fortified wine casks. Lots of sherry casks in the game these days. A lot of guys say they're finishing in sherry, but we're the only Scotch whiskey distillery that gets casks that were first used to make a 30-year-old Oloroso sherry called Methuselah. As part of their sherry collection, you might find Methuselah. That is the brand. It's a 30-year-old sherry produced by Gonzalez Baez, and we're the only ones that gets those casks. So about 5% of that rich 30-year-old Oloroso is still locked in the pores of the wood when we get those freshly dumped sherry butts, and that puts an indelible thumbprint on the DNA of the Dalmore. It stands in stark contrast to what most everybody else does, because whiskey is so much more popular than sherry these days, right? How do we get all these sherry casks when no one's drinking sherry? Well, most whiskey producers are having new casks coopered for them, and then taking those to the sherry bodega and paying to rent wine for about 18 months, and then they get a sherry seasoned cask and take that on to their distillery. So what we've got here instead, 30 years in the making, really adds to the sweetness, the complexity, the subtlety of the Dalmore, as opposed to those younger sherries which are just going to kind of punch through. There's an elegance here. And that, if nothing else, I think is the most important thing to remember about us. 12 year. We always start our maturation process in first fill bourbon barrels in the modern era. So the new spirit going into that heavily charred American oak barrel that was first used to make a bourbon, and we'll build our initial foundation there. And then after that, we'll pivot to different casks. 9 years in first fill bourbon, and then half of the batch, so half of those barrels that we've set aside to make this, will be re-racked or finished in that 30-year-old Oloroso Methuselah sherry. The other half stay in bourbon. After 3 more years, so we're now at a minimum of 12 years, we marry it all together to create this creature here. So on the nose, you'll get, I think, your cleanest and most obvious expression of the house character of the chocolate orange. Dark chocolate, orange zest or orange peel. Maybe sometimes it strikes me a little candied orange, maybe a hint of clove, but it's really about that chocolate orange. And once you've got a sense of that, go ahead and take a small sip. Let it linger on your palate for a while, even kind of chew on it, roll it around, feel it coat your tongue, and then swallow that. We don't use peat in any part of our production process in the Dalmore. In fact, we dry the barley with steam, and that's one of those reasons why you and I aren't grossed out when we smell it. Because the traditional, old school Scotch, part of that is always that big peaty thing, which we don't use. We are relying on the casks to give us all the flavors here, and that's probably why people tend to think of Dalmore as more of a dessert Scotch. And I'm not saying we only offer it at dessert, but it's a sweeter palate. It's one of the things people love about it. I had you guys through a nosing and tasting. Different people have different methods for this, so I don't like to contradict anybody, and there's more than one way to the mountaintop, but this is what I like to do. We've got a proper whiskey drinking Glencairn glass here, so you don't need to do a lot to it, but sometimes I enjoy rolling the glass, because I like to coat the sides of it. It helps me get the most out of the nosing, especially when I'm just got a taste and not a full 2-ounce pour. And then I'm just gonna swirl it gently. I'm gonna wake it up a little bit. What I'm not gonna do is the wine move of doing that in the glass, because that is going to cause so much evaporation in what's already a distilled spirit, you're going to get a big glass of booze when you lift it to your nose. But I will wake it up a little, and then I'll bring it into the nose. And people have different philosophies about this. In my opinion, you're not going to get much if you've got it down by your chin. You need to get in there. So I bring my nose right to the glass, and I want to stay there for a second with my mouth open slightly, and I'm breathing in my nose and exhaling out of my mouth. Because if I exhale out of my nose, then I'm just kind of ruining everything I just did on the inhale. But you want to stay there for a second. Let that initial boozy note kind of fade, and the character of the whiskey will start to reveal itself to you. You know, like 80% of, or something like that, of what we perceive as flavor is actually coming from our sense of smell. So the time we spend on the nose is really key here, just like with the wine. And then once I think I've got a sense of it, I go in for a taste. And like we've talked about, I want to let it linger on the palate. I want to chew on the whiskey, feel it spread across my tongue, my salivary glands will kind of pop, and only then I swallow that sip. It took us 18 years to make it. We can take a couple seconds to enjoy it. Now, if I had a little bit of water and an eyedropper or a straw to use as a poor man's eyedropper, I might see how that changes it. Usually that'll open up a whiskey in interesting ways. One of the things that's fun about Dalmore is how fantastically it pairs with different foods and different desserts, and one of my all-time favorite pairings, easiest thing in the world that's so delicious, is that Lindt orange chocolate truffle that we've brought. It's dark chocolate with orange cream inside. Take a little bit of your Dalmore cigar malt under the palate, have a little bite of that chocolate, and experience that tremendous pairing.
So this here, 50% Semillon, 50% SP. Steve Mathiasen, the winemaker. This 75% Cab Franc, 25% Merlot. You'll notice the next two wines are just
Dude, I don't know what this is going to taste like, but it smells like proper Cab. It smells really good.
So this is Steve Mathiasen. So he made both of these. A little bit of oak on this one, like 20% aged, 20 months, I think. All estate.
Is it the surprise that's making me think this wine is really good?
I think it's legitimately really good.
I think, did you hear that, Alex?
Trying to
That wine.
separate my shock.
So this is that new one out by Don Giovanni. Steve Mathiasen winemaker. Kashi Khalidi, who is the son of Dariush. This is definitely trying to be the opposite of Dariush. Like I said, the property is amazing and high-end, but it's not posh. It's more like contemporary and art.
It looks
and
like
clean.
millennial,
Yes.
like Instagram central.
Totally
But
gearing
like
towards
Like an
that.
Ace Hotel.
Yeah. No, that's actually good. Yeah, like an Ace Hotel. I'm not. You're not?
The white blend is SB Semillon.
It's très delicious.
It's killer.
What do you think of this one here?
Honestly, I'm still in a place of shock. So I'm having a really hard time being objective about how this tastes. This is not my favorite. It feels a little donutty, like in the center. It feels like it's actually picked too soon, or it's missing a little something.
The brand new. Yeah. So this one probably.
Yeah, that's a beautiful. Actually, both of those are really beautiful complete wines. This feels a little bit incomplete. That is a really beautiful wine. That tastes like Lower Valley Cabernet. I also wondered if sometimes the Coravin does that, like where it just kind of mutes mid-palate, and I'm wondering if that's what's happening.
The sip of this was significantly better than my first.
That's what I really think it's maybe the Coravin just like laying down the mid-palate. Yeah,
cool.
these are solid. Whiskey tasting check, wine tasting check. We are heading into service. Thank you. Those wines were actually really fantastic. I was surprised by the Ashes and Diamonds. I didn't really know what to expect. It's a new label, but I'm definitely going to go visit there so you guys can see this new place. It's apparently pretty cool. It's a really interesting structure down a little bit south of us. So it's now time for service. I hope you guys had fun hanging out. Before we get started tonight, a busy night at press. It's harvest, so it's always a busy night here, but I hope you guys learned something and saw something cool, something interesting, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye.